I really like the climate. I really liked almost every single person I met. It's a really welcoming city.
Wait,
Um,
almost every person you met? Like, do you want to name names and
We're
call
getting
someone
to the
out?
juicy part of the
nope,
Like,
podcast.
no, okay.
nope. That's going to be Riverside After Dark, and we're not
All
on that
right.
session yet.
All right, welcome everybody to the latest episode of the MiamiTech Pod. We've got a great episode for you all. I'm joined here by my co-host, Maria Durchi. Please let us know if you run into our other co-hosts who are still missing, Caesar and Will. It's been a while. We missed them. Tell them that you missed them too. But that being said, let's dive in.
Yes, I'm really excited for today's episode. I'm joined by one of my favorite people and Barry's partners, although I'm missing in action at Barry's lately, Jeremy Wood of OpenStore. Jeremy, welcome to the pod.
Excited to be here. Thanks, guys.
And yes, Jeremy's been incredibly gracious because we've had to reschedule this a few times, one of which I wasn't feeling well, so thank you. But Jeremy, I know that we want to go first through a little bit about your upbringing and what kind of your career path was like leading up to OpenStore. So can you tell us a little bit about Jeremy growing up? Where did you grow up and where did you get your career start?
So I love it. So the first three numbers in Miami phone numbers are 305, and I actually grew up in 503 because I grew up on the complete opposite end of the country in Portland, Oregon. I could not be further away and still be in the continental U.S. So very excited. It has been quite a switch moving out here, but in some ways, actually, which I'll come back to, feels a little bit like coming home. So. Grew up in Portland, Oregon, really fantastic city. Not a huge tech presence, just enough of one because it's sandwiched between Seattle and the Bay Area, but it certainly wasn't that prominent. And then it wasn't really till I moved down to California initially for school that turned into more of a passion. Got my career start after doing a bachelor's and master's at Stanford. Second one was AI, which I was super excited about. Unfortunately, that was in 2017, and the landscape changed completely in the end of 2017 and 2018. So I went off to Google. I was working there in databases and applied research for a little bit before moving out of that stack and to kind of the opposite end of Google, where I was working on cross-product analytics for the entire company. So what that meant was, say a person buys a Google Pixel phone, what impact did that have on Google search revenue? It was essentially a project to make it clear to executives how to invest money across the company. But as a result of it, we were also had one of the best bird's eye view on the entirety of Alphabet at the time, and definitely the intersection of that and e-commerce, as e-commerce was really, I think, thriving at the time. So that certainly got me interested in the space. And then as I got deeper and deeper there and was also talking with Keith and eventually Jack Abraham about starting a company, and we were iterating on ideas, and Jack was the first one to come forward with this e-commerce pitch of there's really this massive problem in e-commerce right now where founders don't have an option for selling their business after they've built it. So they might spend 2 years, they might spend 5 years, they might spend a decade building this up, and the moment they want to stop running it, they don't really have any other option other than winding it down. And this is against a backdrop of what's a really fragmented industry overall, but a massive one, and one that we already see is growing and we have high confidence is going to continue to grow over time. This kind of independent, small store driven e-commerce that really is spearheaded by Shopify, but Shopify is not the only platform that makes that possible. And then obviously on top of Shopify, there's these over 2 million different merchants that are making that a reality every day. And so really serving them with this liquidity problem, and in doing so, being able to try and defragment this industry a little bit and bring in best practices, apply our own kind of tech lens to it, and try and really build tools, not to replace humans on it, but just to supercharge humans and then starting off by doing that internally. But certainly as the company has matured, we've started making those tools a little bit more accessible, certainly with shorter term programs that don't require full acquisition of a business. And then long term, really the vision is just making running a store really, really easy for everyone. And that might be that they sell us their business after they've gone through some of the initial growth phase. It might be that they just work with us on certain parts of the business, or it could be that they give it to us on a short-term basis, which is our current Drive program.
So, Jeremy, before we dig too deep into OpenStore, I am curious, what's some non-obvious or surprising thing that you learned while you were at Google that you're allowed to share that wouldn't violate too many NDAs? Because not many people get to see sort of the network from sort of behind the curtain, so to speak, right?
Yeah, I think one fun one that I'm probably allowed to say is the output of a lot of what I've worked on was this dashboard that you had to have a certain, basically, kind of clearance level within the company to be able to see. So it was either you were working on something that really needed cross-company views, or basically you were a VP or up. And I always thought it was fascinating that the top of this dashboard was basically internet penetration and literacy rate for any given country. Because when you're working at Google scale, you actually care about that in a really awesome way, because they're trying to find ways to enter new markets. And the best way for them to enter a new market is for that market to be using the internet. And if people are using the internet and have good connection to it and feel comfortable consuming content and reading, then Google is one of the first places they go. And I don't think there are many companies in the world that can claim that as a top level metric that they care about. Now, was that really the top level thing driving Google quarter over quarter to success? No, but it was something that people cared enough about for it to be that first thing that you see.
That probably, I'm guessing, drove some of the investment into, what was it, Loom and some of the other crazy moonshot, let's bring internet to the farthest corner of the Sahara Desert, projects and stuff.
I'm somewhat controversially very pro Google as a company, because I think they've generally done a good job, not everywhere, not in every part of the company, but across the board, they've tried to align their own incentives with what I usually think is better for the world. And as a result, you get really cool projects like Loon that's just trying to give people access to internet.
So you mentioned you're at Google and then you end up speaking with Keith and Jack about this idea, but how did you even meet them? What were the origins of you meeting Keith?
So I think much like
Berries?
Miami, actually it was Berries. I think the first time I met him was legitimately out of Berries, now that you mention it. I think like MiamiTech, tech scenes just are not that large. I think you spend long enough in one place and you get a couple of overlaps, and those overlaps lead to a flowering of a network that expands pretty far. And sure, do you know everyone in San Francisco? Absolutely not. Do you meet a number of interesting people? Yes. So I just met him through friends, I think at Barry's at one point, and then had been talking with him for a long time about tech companies, interesting ideas in different spaces. And so I think we were kind of primed, and it was the right moment. I was looking to go off and start something. He was wanting to move to Miami and start this. And he said, Jeremy, the one condition I have on this, you have to move to Miami. Again, I'd never seriously considered moving out here. It was not even on my radar. I brought my partner out here for a month. We'd actually flew down straight from DC, where we'd been for a while during the pandemic. I had a bunch of sweaters in my suitcase. I legitimately don't think I had a single t-shirt. And so for the first couple of weeks in Miami, just feeling it out, I was wandering around like a total idiot in a sweater. And I still liked it. And I was like, if I like it in a sweater, I'm going to like it even more when I have an actual wardrobe down here. So that was a really easy decision to make.
Wait, did you say what month this was in?
This was luckily in January. So like of all the times to be dealing with that, it was okay.
All right. So was okay, you spend a month and you're like, okay, fine, I'm moving.
Yeah. More than fine. I would say it was okay, this is actually pretty awesome. I really like the climate. I really liked almost every single person I met. It's a really welcoming city.
Wait, almost every person you met? Like, do you want to name names and call
We're gonna
someone
do
out?
the juicy part of the
Like,
podcast.
no, okay.
No. That's going to be Riverside After Dark, and not on that
okay.
session yet.
Um,
People were great. I'd actually never met Jack Abraham before, and Keith was simultaneously talking with him, and so I got chatting with him and some of the team at Atomic, and just really liked everyone there. So like first couple of weeks, I would wander over to Jack's house in the morning, and he was gracious enough to host a group of us. Had COVID tests on the way in. And then you'd like COVID test every day as we went over, work until long past dinner time, and then leave. And I think a lot of people go through this when they're starting a company. There just is this like snowball of energy that gets going, and you can't stop thinking about it. You don't want to do anything else. The energy is really infectious, and you just get drawn into it, and suddenly it becomes your life. And that's legitimately how it felt. Like we came down here, but we're supposed to be a month. I don't think I went back to San Francisco where all our stuff was, where we were technically living, for more than a day and a half until like a year after initially coming out here.
Wow.
I said, unfortunately, my partner bore the brunt of that. So my partner was a good sport and went back and helped pack things up after I spent like my day and a half out there trying to do as much as I could. But of course, packing is always like 3x the amount of effort that you expect it to be. So he was an absolute trooper on that.
Shout out to him. Yes.
So wait, so did you, when you guys were, you and Keith and Jack were all talking about sort of OpenStore, was there a sort of idea in mind already, or was it like, we want to work with small business owners or independent store owners in some way, and then we're going to search for what that looks like, or what came first, I guess?
It was pretty fully fleshed. And I think part of that is that we had and still have a strong conviction that the core model has some barriers to entry that mean you don't find a lot of competitors, but is really straightforward in how effective it can be and how it can turn into a kind of win-win-win situation for us, the merchants, and their customers. So I think pretty early on it was, look, there's a liquidity problem for merchants. Basically what I said earlier around there's nowhere to go. There are a couple exchanges and brokers who will handle one-off transactions that take a lot of back and forth. They can be pretty sketchy, very widely in quality. You're normally selling to half the time an unknown buyer. The other half of the time it's a buyer that's kind of just buying this as a hobby. They probably don't know much better what they're actually going to do with the business. And so there's this low sense of security around what's going to happen to the business after it gets sold, which for people who have spent 5 years building this business, they don't want a low sense of security that their business is going to survive if they think that they built a really awesome business. Like this is their baby at the end of the day. And so like that was the fact that there was nowhere to go with this massive industry. And we were talking to merchants. Atomic had done a survey at one point where 85% of merchants would be interested in selling if they had the opportunity. Like the need there was very clear. And then from our side of, okay, there's a clear need here for a really large segment of the industry. Can we turn that into a profitable business? It certainly seems like it. It seemed like, okay, we just have to be able to ingest, and I say just here a little facetiously, we have to be able to ingest what they're doing with their business and do that just as effectively. And over time, get better and better at that. So do we believe that we can replicate what they're doing? There are some really fantastic, amazing, incredible Shopify builders out there that I can confidently say we will probably never rival because they have some perfect magic combination. Do I think that is every Shopify merchant out there? No, I think a lot of them are smart, intelligent people who are working hard at running an e-commerce store and have gradually iterated towards doing that effectively. Do we think we can replicate that? Probably yes, or at least that was a hypothesis early on. Do we think we can get better at that over time? Absolutely. Do we think that we can build tech tools to make that incredibly effective? Definitely. And then finally, do we think that we can actually find a way to like build towards more cohesive experiences that pull together all of these stores and therefore mean that this portfolio of merchants is going to be more valuable to us than it was for merchants? Also probably yes. And therefore, as a result of that, you can give better offers to merchants and provide better services to their customers, which then gets into this, okay, it's a win-win-win. Like we're able to give progressively better offers over time to merchants. Their customers are hopefully going to have better experiences over time. And everyone will hopefully be happy. So like once we got to that, and that was really early on, I think everyone was just bought into the idea, and it hasn't significantly changed as a mission since we first started.
That's really interesting. I mean, I think people underestimate the number of hats that a Shopify e-commerce store owner wears in like day-to-day operating of their businesses and stuff, and like a lot of the folks who get into it are craftsmen, right? They're like people who they invented something that they thought others would want to buy, and then they went about like sourcing and logistics and all these other things, but a lot of those things I gotta assume, are not the areas where these folks want to spend their time, right? Like they want to get back to creating or producing something, right?
Oh, exactly. And I think bluntly, the creation is a piece where I have so much respect, because it is figuring out what product to sell in a quickly changing landscape, figuring out how to market it, figuring out like how to target effectively and then grow that up from nothing. Like that's really hard. And again, actually, do I think we could confidently do that? I think we probably could. Am I willing to bet everything on it? Probably not. And that's where like our goal is find founders who have done a really awesome job with that iteration, with that initial creation, and creativity that goes into that, and then give them an out as it gets to the point where really all they're doing is scaling that business.
Now you kind of led the charge on a new product. I want to say Gumdrop. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, happily. So where to begin on that?
So what is Gumdrop? I have this is one area of my preliminary research on before this call that I did not get to. So
no, that's perfect. So Gumdrop is our influencer marketplace that we built out. The goal there was, look, we have a lot of brands. We really believe in the power of individual creativity. That's exactly what we were just talking about and how these stories even get started. But it also comes into play with how to promote these products and make sure that customers are aware of them. And the truth is, like, e-commerce has been suffering since Apple started cracking down a little bit on privacy. And that really has changed how people market through Facebook, and has led towards strategies where really you want to find other ways to get products in front of customers, and also give customers another viewpoint other than the hyper polished one and fairly limited one that you put out on store websites. So across e-commerce, we're certainly not novel in this. There's been a lot of interest in the creator economy over the past six-ish years. And so we wanted to lean into that. And as we started doing more of that, we realized the process was really burdensome, both for companies and for creators. It's this like 3-week process of either they find you or you find them, and then you make sure that the other party is interested in working with you. And then you're negotiating over the exact details of this contract. And then finally, you have to figure out exactly which product they want. And then you ship that out. And like 4 weeks after you first contacted them, or they first contacted you, in 25% of the cases that actually this succeeds, you're then working together. And so we really wanted to streamline that. And so we built out our own marketplace where the pitch, both internally for why this is good for us and why it's good for influencers, is because we have access to all these brands and we're actually the owners of them, we can basically make a lot of that matching process programmatic and just give influencers who sign up access to a bunch of different products in our catalog, and say, if you want this, it's yours. All you have to do is promote it. And it's that easy for them. They click on it, they agree to it, they move forward. So it was trying to take what was like a 4-week process and turn it into, once you're on the platform, a couple of minutes at most. So that was kind of we were running that at first as a very small, somewhat separate company within OpenStore, because we didn't want it to be unduly influenced by the brands that we're also trying to manage. We really wanted to optimize for the creators that we were building for. And that's what Gumdrop is.
Cool. And now I feel like I'm compelled to download this and check it out to see what I can get for sort of free later.
It's honestly really fun and intoxicating for exactly that reason, because especially if you have any sort of follower base, there's a middle level where you can start to see really extreme discounts as long as you're willing to promote the product, and then there's of course a level where you'll get just free products. And so it's very fun. You'll get a new drop every week of 10 to 15 products. You can go through the rest of our catalog, mark things as interested, and they'll, for the most part, pop up in your drop the week after. So if you like getting free product in exchange for promoting it, it's actually really fun and pretty easy to get onto, and was really fun to build. Like I love the 0 to 1, which is not something I knew when I was at Google. It was something I suspected. And then honestly, back to those like early weeks at Jack's Place, I got completely intoxicated with that. And that's where I find I thrive. And so it was fun leading into that with the really awesome team that we pulled together to build out Gumdrop.
Do you guys think like side projects like this are like a viable or a good marketing strategy for you guys? You know, because there's a ton of tooling and other things that store owners could use, right? Or consumers from stores could use, right? I don't know if that's a distraction or if it's something that would actually make sense for you guys.
Depends on the tool.
Yeah.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head with, that's absolutely one of our approaches. How do we become more useful to merchants? How do we make sure that they know who we are and they also trust that we actually understand what we're talking about, and understand what we're going to do once we take over their business? One of the best ways to do that is to, over time, build more tools for them. Gumdrop's actually one of the first forays into that for ourselves, where it is external facing, but it still is right now just a tool for OpenStore merchants. Over time, as with everything we build, we definitely want to make it available to merchants externally, both as marketing and really just as relationship building.
So after coming out of Google and starting OpenStore, that's kind of like drinking from the fire hose as your first, foray into the startup world. It sounds like. What has it been like? Advice for other founders?
Dive in. Seriously, like, the water is warm. Go for it. Try it out. The worst thing that happens, and I think this is more widely known now in tech than maybe it was a couple of years ago, but the worst thing that happens is you fail and the company fails. And that's bad. That's awful. That's like soul crushing at the time, but it's also not life ending, and it's a fixed amount of time. So I think the risk is relatively low on starting a company. Don't do it flippantly, but also I constantly encourage people to go try it out and see if it is for them. I think the other better advice or best advice I got was, as with many areas of life, nobody 100% knows what they're doing. I think there's a little bit of imposter syndrome the moment you dive into a new field. And the best way to counteract that is just reason from first principles and trust yourself and trust your own instincts on that. Or better yet, trust your own logic on that. I think that was very much the case for me, especially working alongside someone like Keith, who's absolutely a titan in the industry, has been through this many times. And there were definitely moments early on where I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, do I? And then I'd sit down for a little bit, try and reason it out, and realize maybe I actually did have an idea of what I was doing. And it's largely about putting one foot in front of the other and reasoning up from first principles. And then when you don't know something, asking people. And I think that's good advice just generally for life.
I would say that super applies to like being a new parent. Like you're freaked out by being responsible for someone else's livelihood and life and all that, and then you realize other people were able to figure this out, right? Why can't I? It's not that complex. It's all inputs and outputs in the beginning, and
100%. And honestly, I think the stakes are maybe even higher with a human child than
oh,
starting a business.
I would agree. I would agree on that front. Yes. Yeah.
It starts to transition. We're now at 125 people at the company. So it starts to maybe in some ways be a little bit higher stakes. Put a different way, it's absolutely higher stakes than it is when you're starting a company and it's 5 of you. But when it's 5 or fewer, like again, what's the worst that can happen? This isn't a human child that you're raising.
Yeah, Brian, you won't know for another good 15 years how much you screwed up. So you have some time.
Damn. All right. On that note, so Jeremy, you've been in Miami now, what, 18 months, give or take, or 2 years?
No, more like I've been here for 2 years and 10 months minus 10 days.
So,
oh wow,
that is much more precise
no
than I
one's
expected.
counting.
Yeah. So like in that time, in that 2+ years, since I won't know the exact number again in my head, but what's been like the most surprising thing, or rather, what's the biggest frame shift you've had about what your expectations were of Miami versus what like you've come to know it as?
So let me see if I can give a more nuanced answer afterwards, because the initial one comes from a really low bar because I did not know Miami.
That's fine. Listen, there's no group of people that shits on Miami more than actual Miamians.
No, we like to set the low bar so that everybody's pleasantly surprised when they get
very pleasantly surprised. And in fact, I would maybe even say floored. My first and only real impression of Miami had been getting stuck here when I was supposed to head elsewhere and got stymied by a hurricane, and was staying in a really awful hotel as it poured outside, and yet still I was over on the beach, and still people were finding ways to go out and get absolutely wrecked.
So you discovered our legendary hurricane parties is what I'm hearing.
I discovered that Miami was free flowing. And I don't think I left with the highest estimation of like, that's the place I want to go to build a company, build a career, and do anything more than like spend a weekend. When I got here, I think almost immediately got taken to Wynwood, after which I promptly discovered both, I guess, everywhere on the Miami side. Like you go all the way down to Coral Gables, you go up to North Miami, you go out and like go have a beer at Tripping Animals. There's just a lot of really fun low-key culture that I definitely didn't see on my first visit out here. And I think I mentioned this at the beginning, like in some ways really reminded me of some of my favorite parts about Portland, Oregon, which is probably the first time that someone has compared the two and said that they're similar. But you get this like strong focus on health. You get the strong focus on being outdoors. Yes, it's a different form of being outdoors. One is hiking in the woods. One is going out and like playing on the ocean and on the beach. You get this like kind of very local culture with permeable barriers between them. So you have these very distinct neighborhoods that have their own independent cultures, but there's actually very thin lines between that. It's not like LA where people are refusing to go back and forth between those. And so you get this kind of, how would I even describe it? You get this like fast iteration on bars, restaurants, small community centers that means that those actually turn into really fun local centers of community that do belong to that area, but are accessible to everyone in Miami. And I was really surprised by that. I really like it. I think it pops up in breweries. I think it pops up in restaurants. I think it pops up in like public parks, and the just like sheer number of those. Some of those like really casual, some of those very much not casual. I think of like Fairchild Botanical Gardens as one of the perfect examples of that, where like everyone, if you spend long enough in Miami at some point, has to go to Fairchild Botanical Gardens or Vizcaya. And it's really cool that that even exists. I think coming from San Francisco, where you're also dealing with like a very landlocked mass. And so to do much within San Francisco, at a certain point, you end up just leaving San Francisco. There's like not a whole lot of space there. I think in contrasting it with New York, of course, there's everything under the sun that you could possibly do. But again, it's really dense. There is a not nearly as much of a sense of ownership in place as you have in some of the different districts in Miami. And there's not as much, I think, just like variety of lifestyle because it is so densely packed and so hard to live there. So again, like I was really pleasantly surprised with Miami. It was just such a high quality of life place to live and across a variety of dimensions that I like did not expect going in.
I love how much you've explored. And one of the questions I was had for you was, when you're not heads down building at OpenStore, where are your favorite places to go? And you mentioned tripping animals. I don't think I know what that is.
It's a brewery. They're focused on sour beers. I want to say it's out in Hialeah, but my boundaries on exact location blur a little bit out there, so it's probably not exactly right there. Really fun. You'll see their cans around Miami. Without saying any more about.
Do they have monkeys on them? I feel like I've seen.
Yeah,
this.
Some of them do.
Okay.
They're crazy. They're all over the place.
Okay, what are some of your other spots?
Great question. So I live in Midtown. I absolutely love Midtown. It's like the perfect combination of easy to access other areas of Miami. It's nice. It's clean. It's close to where I work, so I can just walk to work every day and really have nothing bad to say about it. It's like got a little bit of everything there. So as a result, end up wandering Design District. MIA Food Market, I think, is really a hidden gem. Actually hidden. I think a lot of people just don't know it exists. A lot of really fun restaurants in there. Going all the way down to downtown, we've been really longtime fans of Jaguar Sun. Cool restaurant. They do a lot of like small independent pop-up stuff. And then overall, like I think that was the first place where I came to Miami and said, okay, wow, there is an absolute defiance of the stereotype I had that Miami has absolutely terrible service and restaurants that are meant to be consumed by tourists who are going to pay way too much for bad food and sparklers on their champagne. And this was like kind of the antithesis of that. So for me, it was the like breakout moment of, okay, I have to completely reevaluate everything I thought about Miami early on. So really love that place. The staff there is incredible. Food there is incredible. Drinks there are incredible. Really cool space that they turned into a like powerhouse in the back of a hotel. So absolutely mad respect. If you can't tell, I'm just a little bit of a fan. Honestly, like the museums and all of the stuff that pops up around that in Miami, I think are just completely outsized relative to the size of the city. Again, as I think anyone who lives here for a long time knows, there's a big focus on arts year round. It's not just Art Basel, and that pops up in the museums. And then you have cool places like, I really love Frost. Outside of that, it's probably just a lot of going out to different either places north Miami or all the way down to Coral Gables. I think they're just fun neighborhoods to wander around in.
Jeremy, have you guys
Can I turn that back on you guys? I'm actually curious.
Absolutely.
What are your guys' like top one or two answers for that question?
Maria is a gourmand, so she has knocked off every single Michelin star restaurant in Miami. If you follow her Instagram,
I have not. I have a few more left, but I want to eat all the things all the time.
I mean, look, I think it depends on the vibe that you're going for, right? Like, I have some of my favorite, like, hole in the wall Nicaraguan restaurants and hole in the wall Cuban places that I like, or Peruvian, that like a tourist would be like aghast if I took them there, but then they would be like, holy crap, this is great food, and then the flip side is, the sort of service, haute cuisine, or the environment, right? Like Amara has a great view. It's like it's solid food. It's not the most amazing, but it's a great view. Versus I don't know. There's a ton of new breweries and like that are very relaxed and laid back now, and like you lucked out since if you're into beers because the beer scene has like exploded in the last 5 years in Miami. Like 10 years ago, there was like one brewery in all of South Florida.
Well, Brian's big into barbecue. He kind of tests out all
Yes,
the new barbecue
yeah.
places. So
I,
if you
I
ever
I'm
want
I would
barbecue,
say I'm a big fan of both traditional like American barbecue and also like Argentine and any other kind of barbecue. So
Oh, I
like
love
from
that.
a American
Yeah.
barbecue, like hometown is probably the
Yeah.
place I would recommend. But if you're since you're in Midtown, I would say check out Fiorito, which is a little Argentinian barbecue place. It's not that far from you. And then like in right near there, there's Bongu Barbecue is a Haitian barbecue place, which is solid. And there's also Boya Day, which is a great restaurant
Mhm.
near there, which I'm sure you've tried, But I
Yeah.
mean,
I'm honestly became obsessed very early on with the empanada scene out here. I think my excitement has cooled down a little bit as I ate enough of them that I
well,
probably
what
just
kind?
didn't need
Argentinian
any more.
empanadas, Colombian empanadas, Cuban empanadas.
Largely Argentinian. Um, don't ask
Those
me
are
for a favorite
healthier.
place.
They're
I
at
don't
least.
have one. Yeah, they're a little bit healthier, a little bit lighter, so I felt like I could eat more. Um, Largely Argentinian, but there's just something about they're warm, they're convenient. You can take them on the go. So for a busy man trying to build a company, empanadas were great.
you can get them delivered, like, well, granted, you
Totally,
get
they
everything
keep
delivered
well.
now. Yeah. Um, Maria, what's your
Oh, this
go-to?
is tough. Yeah, I agree with Brian. There's some hole in the walls that I love. There used to be, I think they have a physical location in Coral Gables, but it used to be a food truck in Design District called Caja Caliente, which is like Cuban fusion, which I loved. I just tried recently the new Schnitzel House, which was very good, right on 79th Street. Um, and then Bode is a huge
Maria, did
fan of that.
Rasmus sign off on the
Yes, he
Schnitzel House?
did.
He approved. Oh, so Jeremy, for context, Maria's partner is a German-born transplant to Miami as well.
He's met him briefly.
Okay, and so if
Yeah.
he approves of it being solid German food, then I gotta add that to my list.
Yeah.
Especially since I didn't know we had any in Miami.
Yeah, there's like two. It's that and Fritz and Franz and Coral Gables. But that's more of a place you go to drink a boot-shaped beer, and watch a World Cup game type of thing.
There's a time
But
and a
I
place.
agree on
Yeah.
the sushi in Mia Market. Yaku, I always say the name wrong. Tansu, I don't know. That is amazing. The sushi in the food hall. Mia,
Yeah.
well, I know. Is it Mia Market now? It used to be called Saint Roche, the one in Design District.
I always interpret it as MIA Market, but it might be Mia
Oh,
Market because
that,
I actually have no idea. I don't know whether it's
yeah, me
capitalized,
either.
whether it's Miami or like mine. I'm gonna be looking that up later.
And then I'm a hidden, another one I never know how it's said. But that was one of my favorite omakase experiences. And the chef there opened up his new restaurant, Shingo, in Coral Gables. And he actually lives in my building in Midtown. And so I've been meaning to go check that out. So
Have you met him?
I have in the elevator. I was like, I want to
So,
go
so Jeremy, one thing you'll learn the longer you stay in Miami is that Miami is actually like the biggest small town ever, and like everybody is like two
Yeah.
degrees separated, and so knows so and especially like the more you get into sort of meeting locals and meeting and I also consider anybody who's been here over 3 years a local. So you're
Yeah, boy,
approaching
do I
that
believe it.
threshold.
Woohoo!
So,
We'll have a party.
but
Yeah, it's like 2 degrees of separation between it, if that much.
where do we want to go next with this conversation that meandered off the rails?
No, I love talking
I
about
think
this.
we've also only got 3-ish more minutes. I can go a
Yeah.
little bit over, but
No,
hit
I
me.
think we can wrap. This has been great.
Okay. Sorry that
Cool.
we
All
spent so
right.
much of it on food. Hopefully that's good content. Um,
So
it definitely was
Jeremy, let
fun
me. I'll
chatting.
ask you some closing questions. Like you know, if someone's running a Shopify store, like how do they get in touch with you? What are the things that you guys are looking for in them, right? Because you don't want Maria's weird uh, trinket store to holler
Depends
at
how
you
He
weird.
does.
guys. Well,
He does.
I
that's
think
between
we
Maria and
do.
the internet,
Yeah.
not me. You know. So
Yeah, who are the right customers? Who should be signing up for this?
Yeah, so at this point, we have a couple different programs. I mean, we range all the way from Boost, which we're running right now for relatively small merchants, all the way up to acquisitions. So Boost is really there for Shopify merchants that are struggling to take off. This is really in the like early phase of lifestyle for those. That's usually less than 50K in revenue, and then 50 to 500K is really I flipped that. 50 to 500K is really the sweet spot for Boost right now. And then over time, we're hoping to drive that even lower. And then above 500K, we get into drive and acquisitions where we'll either operate your business for a year or we'll just buy it outright from you. So really, like anything above that 50K in net sales, we're actually really excited to talk to the merchant. Usually we want it to have been around for at least a year before we really want to go and price it, because otherwise it's just a little unstable for us. We also don't know what we're taking over. We're also a little weirded out that you really want to get rid of it after just a year of it. Other than that, kind of the sky's the limit. We cover all sorts of categories. Our premise is we'll price almost any business because we think most businesses can be valuable to both us and to their owners.
Amazing.
So really, sky's the limit.
Awesome. I want to thank you so much, Jeremy, for your time and for sharing a little bit about your story with our listeners.
Likewise, this was really fun today.
Jeremy, what's the best place for people to get in touch with you, follow you, cyberstalk you, whatever it is?
I don't yet have a Twitter, so I'm not great at that, but you can go to open.store, and we've got a lot of social media attached to that. Definitely go to open.store if you want to apply either careers or drop us a line about your business. Really easy process there. Otherwise, you're just going to have to hunt for me on the internet.
Or stock them at the food court at Design District.
Yeah, local MIA market, maybe berries every now and then, or hopping around Midtown.
Amazing. Right. Jeremy, thanks so much for your time. And everybody, cyberstock Jeremy. No, just kidding. Do not cyberstock.
Nicely, please.
All right.
All right, see you guys.